Each November, as the church year draws to a close, and as the natural world around us dies, the church draws our attention to that final reality itself, death. And the fact that it is not going to be avoided by any of us. The scriptures in these last weeks, both for the Sunday liturgies and weekday mass, continually hammer home that point. And today, of course, is not an exception. We hear both in the first reading from Maccabees and in the Gospel stories about death. They're thinly related, connected in the fact that both deal with 7 brothers who died. But more concretely, both also raise the issue of the resurrection from the dead. Now, the reality of Judaism at the time of Jesus was much more complicated than Judaism today. At the time, there were 3, 4, 5 major sects of Judaism whose beliefs were far from identical. The Judaism that survived down to our day is more or less descended from Pharisaical Judaism. The only Judaism that survived the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD by the Emperor Titus. But in Jesus' day, it was much more complicated. The Sadducees were the priestly class, the most conservative, most traditional. As we hear today, the Sadducees denied the resurrection of the dead. In seminary, we were taught a little ditty that helped us remember that fact. The Sadducees were sad, you see, because they did not believe in the resurrection. But yet, it's still a little more complicated. It's not that they did not believe in a life beyond death, but they embraced the traditional Jewish understanding of Sheol, the shadow dwelling, the land where all went after death, whether good or evil, and dwelt in the shadows. Dark, drear, gray. Kind of like the rest of the world once we leave our beautiful jewel of the ark here. The Pharisees were the first to embrace this revolutionary new understanding as God slowly revealed it of the resurrection of the dead. No longer was death survived only in a shadow world, where it didn't matter what you did in this life. But now the body itself would rise again. And there would be punishment and there would be reward. The good going off to heaven and the evil to Gehenna. Now Gehenna was literally the stinking, burning fire pit for the metropolis of Jerusalem. Truly a hellish place. And for the Jews, it was the most vivid metaphor for what awaited the wicked. Heaven, hell, life, death. In November, these dark and dreary days, the church draws our attention to those realities. And we are challenged to ask, what do I believe? The generations before ours, and our parents and maybe grandparents, lived in a very different world. Death was a part of life. But in our sanitized world today, death is pushed off the stage. We try our best to ignore it. We never really stop to think about it. That's why the church gives us these days now. Because we must think about that reality. wanted to catch Jesus in a trap. They came up with the most ridiculous of stories, thinking there's no way he could answer. They thought they had proven that it was stupid to believe in this resurrection of the dead. But just as every time somebody, be the Pharisees, scribes, or Sadducees, or whomever, tried to catch up Jesus with stupid questions, he refused to be drawn in. His response basically was, "You're missing the point. The life to come, although it is a continuation of this life, is so much more different than it is the same that you can't even use the same categories." And he ended simply by drawing upon the words of Moses, whom the Sadducees most certainly revered. The words of the burning bush. In fact, Moses here is simply echoing the words of God himself, who, as Moses approached the bush, cried out, "This is sacred ground, come no further." When Moses asked, "Who are you?" gave him reply, I am being who I am being, I will be who I will be, I am who I am. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And that's precisely what Moses told the Israelites when they asked, "Who sent you to us?" And Jesus made the point that God is God of the living. He said he's the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. That means Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are not dead. Because God is not the God of those who are rotting in the grave. He's the God of those who live. He demolished the stupid argument of the Sadducees. Now, what do we believe? Do we truly believe in the resurrection of the dead? Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, we come here, we go through the motions. But do we embrace what we hear professed? Every Sunday, I believe in the resurrection of the dead, the life of the world to come. Does that really mean anything to us? In our world where we ignore death, there's always the temptation that we never even take the time to ask ourselves. We don't want to think about that. But we must. For everything depends upon the answer to that question. What do we believe? And we can't believe in some amorphous life to come. We aren't bodily spirits like ghosts roaming through nothingness. That's the whole point of the resurrection. That Jesus rose in the body. Do we believe that that is what awaits us? After I was out of college, I went through a pretty long struggle with faith, teetering on the verge of atheism, thinking too much and finding it all hard to grasp, to accept. Then I made the mistake. In one of our churches right here in the Jewel of New York, my memory serves me correct, Good Friday, the year of our Lord, 1989, of praying, "Lord, I want to believe you're there. I just can't, so if you're there, let me know. Never tempt God." I asked for faith, and he gave me far more than I wanted. I simply wanted to believe and then go on with life. Supermodels, fast cars, big houses. I never wanted to be up here. God had other plans. But my faith rested on one pivotal question. And if I can answer that question, then everything else was child's play and fell into place. Did this individual who lived in the first century of the Christian era, this individual known as Yeshua ben Jacob, Yeshua HaNazarene, did this individual actually rise in the body from the grave. I read and thought, explored every option. One of my favorites being that Jesus was simply a space alien. And when he ascended back into heaven, he was simply caught up back to the mothership to go to the home planet. Search the internet, that's not an original thought either. Lots of people out there that will say that kind of stuff. If you look, people have tried to explain the origins of Christian faith in the most bizarre kinds of explanations. But I eventually arrived at the point that intellectually and logically I could not account for the fact that we were here 2,000 years later professing his faith in the resurrection, except for the fact that this man, Yeshua, seen by 12 men, died a horrible death on Calvary at the hands of the Romans, was put into the dark of the grave for 3 days, but then was inexplicably seen by them alive. Not some amorphous vision, but in their presence, eating with them. They actually reached out and touched his body. To me, there's no other way to account for the fact that we are here as Christians now. Do we believe that reality? Because if we do, everything else falls into place. Do we mourn our loved ones who have gone before us, believing that they are truly gone? Or do we understand that we will see them together again in the joy of the kingdom, as the prayers of the funeral liturgy itself declare? Oh, what an incredible hope and joy is ours. But we must embrace that truth. We must let it sink into the depths of our being. In these dark and drear days, as the natural world dies, we must take the invitation that the church puts before us and ask, look into the depths of our being. Ask, what do I believe? Is my faith a mindless going through the motions Sunday after Sunday for God knows what reason? Do I truly believe that those who have gone before, and ourselves, and our final day will indeed rise in the body and live forever? There is no more important question in our lives than that, and we cannot afford to ignore it. This year, let us seize the invitation, let us look into ourselves, and let us honestly answer. Let us ask the Lord to increase our faith. Those words that Peter spoke so long ago. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And truly, again, as the Apostle Paul said, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor has it so much as dawned in the hearts of people what God has in store for those who love him. If we truly believe that, then everything else, no matter what we struggle with in this life, everything else is secondary. Sadducees were Sadducees because they couldn't move beyond their more of our traditionalism and conservatism and embrace this revolutionary new teaching. They would rise and fly. We go through life sad for that same reason. Is this all that there is for us? God, help us if that were true. Do we believe in the resurrection and death? Life and life to know. Everything depends on that reality. What do we believe?